The scent of expensive sandalwood and sea salt still haunts my dreams, even 4 years later. I remember the way the Hawaiian moon hit the amber liquid in his glass, liquid he barely touched, while I spiraled into a blur of laughter and Mai Tais. "You're too smart to be this reckless, Priscilla," he had whispered. His voice was like velvet over gravel, a dangerous melody that should have sent me running. Instead, I leaned in. Jason, that was the name he gave me. He spoke of market volatilities and offshore yields with the precision of a surgeon, his Asian-American heritage lending him an air of stoic mystery. I told him I was a business analyst. He told me he was visiting family. I ignored the wall of muscle, men in dark suits with cold eyes, standing guard at the edge of the VIP lounge. I thought they were the club's security. I didn't realize they were his. I woke up the next morning in a silk-sheeted bed that cost more than my tuition, alone, with a gap in my memory and a fire in my veins. 2 months later, the stick turned blue. I didn't just bring back a tan from Hawaii. I brought back a secret that would eventually put a target on my back. "Evans, put your shoes on, sweetie. We're going to be late for the park," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. Every time I look at my son, I see a ghost. Evans has his father's eyes, deep, hooded, and an unnerving shade of obsidian that seems to see through lies. He has the same quiet intensity, the same way of tilting his head when he's calculating a move. At just 3 years old, he is a constant, living reminder of that night in Honolulu. Sonia and Venus think I'm just a cool, single mom who had a wild fling. They don't know about the nightmares. They don't know that I spent months scouring the internet for a Jason who fit that description, only to find nothing. It was as if he didn't exist. But as I strapped Evans into his car seat, a black SUV pulled up across the street. The windows were tinted dark enough to hide a monster. My heart hammered against my ribs. California is a big state, but suddenly the air felt as thin as it did on that Hawaiian balcony. Someone was watching, and for the first time in years, I felt the cold shadow of the man with the sandalwood scent. In my line of work, patterns are everything. As a business analyst, I find the anomalies in the data. For the past week, the anomalies have been following me. First, it was the flowers delivered to my office with no card. Then, the mysterious scholarship fund that appeared in Evans' name from an untraceable offshore account. My skin crawled. This wasn't a secret admirer, this was a reclamation. "Priscilla, you're spacing out again," Venus said, nudging me in the break room. "Still thinking about that mystery guy from the birthday trip? Girl, it's been years." "I have a bad feeling, Venus," I whispered, clutching my coffee mug. "I think he found us." I went home that night and did what I do best, I dug. I didn't search for Jason this time. I searched for the men in the suits. I searched for the symbol I saw tattooed on the wrist of the man who held the door for him that night, a stylized crane wrapped in barbed wire. The search results didn't lead to a businessman. They led to Chin-hae, the shadow king of the North Pacific Syndicate, a man whose business wasn't stocks and bonds but blood and silence. The locks on my apartment felt like toothpicks when I heard the heavy thud against the door. I didn't scream, my voice died in my throat. I ran to Evan's room, my only instinct to shield him, but a tall figure was already standing in the hallway. The moonlight from the window caught the sharp line of a jaw I had traced with my fingers once upon a time. "You've gotten better at hiding, Priscilla, but your filing system for offshore accounts is still a bit loud," he said. It was him, but he wasn't the Jason who talked about business ethics. He wore a suit that cost a year of my salary, and his hand was resting on a holster. The mean-looking men from the party were now flanking my front door like statues of death. "What do you want?" I gasped, clutching a kitchen knife I knew was useless. "I came for what belongs to me," he said, his eyes shifting toward the door where Evans lay sleeping. I didn't realize my legacy had been living in a 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. Chin-hae Jason stepped into the light. He looked older, harder, his beauty now sharpened into a weapon. He didn't look at me with passion, but with a terrifying, obsessive ownership. "He has my eyes," Chin-hae remarked, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous hum. He moved toward me, ignoring the knife. He caught my wrist, his grip like iron, and pulled me flush against his chest. The smell of sandalwood overwhelmed me, triggering a flash of that night, the heat, the sweat, the way he had claimed me before the blackout. "You lied to me," I hissed, struggling against him. "I protected you," he countered. "But the world is no longer safe for a woman carrying the blood of a king. You have 2 choices, Priscilla. You can walk out of here with me and your son, or my men can carry you. Either way, you are never leaving my sight again." He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear, sending a traitorous shiver down my spine. Happy anniversary, sweetheart. The private jet felt less like a luxury and more like a high-altitude prison. Evans fell asleep in the plush leather seat, tucked under a cashmere blanket provided by a silent, bowing attendant. Chin-hae sat across from me, a laptop open, his fingers dancing across the keys as he moved millions of dollars like chess pieces. "Where are you taking us?" I asked, my voice raw. "To a place where the name Priscilla doesn't exist," he said without looking up. "From now on, you are under the protection of the Beak clan. You will live in my estate in the hills. You will have everything you desire, provided you do not cross the perimeter." I looked out the window at the clouds. I was a business analyst. I knew how to calculate risk. The risk of running was death. The risk of staying was losing my soul to a man who saw me as an asset to be managed. "I'm not a trophy, Chin-hae." He finally looked at me, his eyes dark and hungry. "You aren't a trophy. You are the mother of my heir. That makes you the most precious and most hunted woman in my world. I'm not keeping you prisoner, I'm keeping you alive." The estate was a fortress of glass and stone, hidden deep in the emerald canyons of the Pacific coast. As we pulled through the gates, a small army of guards bowed in unison. Evans gripped my hand, his eyes wide with wonder at the koi ponds and the towering marble pillars. "Is this Grandma's house?" Evans asked innocently. Chin-hae knelt, his expression softening in a way that terrified me more than his anger. "No, Evans, this is your home. Everything you see here will be yours one day." He looked at me over the boy's head. A silent challenge in his gaze. He led us to a suite that overlooked the ocean. It was filled with toys for Evans and designer clothes in my exact size. He had been planning this for a long time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Chin-hae stepped into my room, closing the door with a click that echoed like a heartbeat. The professional facade was gone. The predator was back. "You've been avoiding my gaze all day," Chin-hae murmured, walking toward me. I backed away until my heels hit the edge of the massive bed. "I don't know who you are," I whispered. "The man in Hawaii was kind, you're a monster." "The man in Hawaii was a mask," he growled, reaching out to cut my jaw. His thumb traced my lower lip, a gesture that was both a caress and a command. "But the way you screamed my name wasn't a lie. Your body remembers me, Priscilla." He crashed his lips against mine, a brutal, possessive kiss that tasted of salt and desperation. I tried to push him away, but the spark from 4 years ago ignited instantly. My hands, meant to shove him, ended up clutching his silk shirt. He lifted me easily, tossing me onto the bed and hovering over me. The heat between us was a physical weight. Every touch was an assertion of his dominance, reclaiming the territory he had marked years prior. In the darkness of the room, as he showed me exactly how obsessed he had become, I realized that I wasn't just his captive. I was his addiction. I woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs, and the heavy weight of a tattooed arm draped across my waist. Chin-hae was still asleep, his face looking younger and almost peaceful in the morning light. I carefully lifted his arm and crept out of bed, my body aching from the intensity of the night. I found a silk robe and walked to the balcony. Below, I saw Evans playing in the garden with 2 men in suits who looked wildly out of place holding a plastic ball. "He likes the garden," Chin-hae's voice came from the shadows of the room. He walked out, bare-chested, the scars on his back telling stories of a life I could barely imagine. "He needs a normal life, Chin-hae, not guards and high-security fences." "There is no normal for us," he said, standing behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist, pulling me back against him. "My enemies found out about him the moment I did. If you leave this house, you die. If he leaves, he's kidnapped. This is the only way." A week into my residence, I realized I couldn't just sit and wait for my fate. I was a business analyst. I dealt in information. If Chin-hae wouldn't tell me who was hunting us, I would find out myself. While he was away at a meeting in the city, I used the laptop in his study. He thought he had blocked the external servers, but he underestimated my ability to find backdoors in encrypted code. I found files, not on business but on a rival family, the Kim Syndicate. They were the ones who had been tracking me in California, but then I found a folder labeled Priscilla. Inside were photos of me from the last 4 years, me at the grocery store, me at the park with Evans, me crying at the hospital when Evans had a fever. He hadn't just found me recently. He had been watching me from the shadows the entire time. Every moment of my struggle as a single mother, he had been a spectator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The glow of the monitor reflected off my skin as I scrolled through years of my own life. There I was, my mahogany skin pale under the harsh fluorescent lights of the maternity ward, holding Evans for the first time. There I was at his first birthday, my hair in a messy puff, laughing with Sonia and Venus. He hadn't just known, he had curated my life from a distance. "You like what you see," Chin-hae's voice sliced through the silence. I spun around, my heart hammering. "You watched me struggle, you watched me work 2 jobs to pay for daycare while you sat in this palace. Why?" He walked into the room, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Because if I brought you here then the war was too hot, you would have been a casualty. I kept you in the dark to keep you safe." Safe, I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. I was a black woman raising an Asian American son alone in a world that already looks at us sideways. I thought I was crazy, feeling eyes on me at the park. "You didn't protect me, Chin-hae, you stalked me." Before he could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the estate. The floor buckled, and the massive floor-to-ceiling windows shattered into a million diamond-like shards. Chin-hae was on top of me in a second, shielding my body with his own as glass rained down. The alarms began to wail, a low, guttural drone that signaled a perimeter breach. "Evans," I screamed, pushing at his chest. "My men are with him, stay down." Chin-hae pulled a sleek, silver handgun from a hidden compartment under the desk. The calm businessman was gone, the Shadow King had arrived. He grabbed my hand, pulling me toward a hidden door behind the bookshelf. "The Kim Syndicate, they didn't wait for the summit, they're here for the boy." We ran through the narrow service corridor, the sound of gunfire echoing through the vents. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a corporate takeover, this was an execution. We reached the nursery just as a man in a tactical mask kicked in the door. My breath hitched, but Chin-hae didn't hesitate. 2 shots rang out, precise and deadly. The man slumped to the floor. I lunged for Evans, who was hiding under his bed, his small face streaked with tears. I pulled him into my arms, pressing his face into my shoulder so he wouldn't see the body. "I've got you, baby, Mommy's here," I whispered, my voice trembling. Chin-hae stood at the door, reloading his weapon with a chilling, mechanical rhythm. He looked at us, at my protective embrace, at our son's terror, and something shifted in his expression. It wasn't just obsession anymore. It was a terrifying, protective rage. "Priscilla, take the stairs to the basement. There is a reinforced panic room," he commanded. "Do not open it for anyone but me, do you understand?" "Chin-hae, wait." "Go." The hours in the panic room felt like years. I sat on the floor, rocking Evans until he finally fell into a fitful sleep. The monitors on the wall showed grainy feeds of the battle outside, shadows moving in the dark, flashes of muzzles, the brutal reality of Chin-hae's world. When the door finally hissed open, I grabbed a heavy lamp ready to swing. But it was him. He was covered in soot, a crimson gash running down his temple, but he was alive. "It's over," he rasped. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright suddenly curdled into something else. I stumbled toward him, checking him for wounds, my hands trembling against his torn shirt. The fear of losing him, the only link to my son's heritage, the man who had occupied my thoughts for 4 years, overwhelmed my anger. He slammed the door shut and pulled me into him. His touch desperate. The scent of gunpowder and sandalwood filled my senses. He needed to feel life and I needed to feel anchored. We didn't speak. In the dim, red emergency light of the bunker, the hunger between us turned feral. It was a release of terror and unspoken longing, his hands dark against my skin as he claimed me again, not as a boss or a stalker, but as a man who would burn the world to keep me. The next morning, the estate was a hive of activity. Cleaning crews replaced glass, and the bodies had vanished as if they never existed. I sat at the long mahogany dining table, Evans eating pancakes as if nothing had happened. Chin-hae sat at the head, a bandage on his head, reading the morning's intelligence reports. "You can't keep us here like this," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos of my emotions. "I know," he replied, looking up. "The Kims think they found a weakness. They think you and Evans are my Achilles heel." He stood up and walked over, placing a heavy gold signet ring on the table in front of me. "I'm not keeping you here as a secret anymore, Priscilla. If the world knows you are the queen of the Beak clan, they won't just fear me. They will fear what I will do to them if they touch a hair on your head." "You're making us targets," I argued. "No," he corrected, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "I'm making you untouchable. Now let's talk about your new role. I need a business analyst I can trust to find where the Kims are hiding their money. If we're going to be a family, we might as well be an empire. I traded my department store blazers for custom-tailored silk that matched the richness of my skin. If I was going to be the queen of a criminal empire, I was going to do it on my terms. Chin-hae gave me access to the Black Ledger, the digital heart of the Beak clan's finances. You're looking for patterns of laundering in the Seoul, California corridor, Chin-hae said, standing behind my chair, his hands resting on my shoulders. I'm looking for more than that, I countered, my fingers flying across the keys. I'm looking for the leak that allowed the Kims to find my apartment in the first place. My transition from a standard analyst to a mafia strategist was terrifyingly seamless. I found millions hidden in shell companies used for human trafficking, business the Beak clan didn't touch but the Kims thrived on. As I dismantled their offshore accounts, I felt a rush of power. For the first time, I wasn't just a victim of the dark, I was the one turning the lights off on my enemies. The peace was shattered by a frantic ping on my personal, encrypted burner phone. It was a message from Sonia. Pris, where the hell are you? We're in Hawaii for my 28th. We went back to that club, and we saw the guy, the Asian guy from 4 years ago. He was looking for you. We followed him to a boat. Priscilla, call us. My heart stopped. Sonia and Venus, the two women who had been my sisters when I had nothing, were walking straight into a hornet's nest. They didn't know the guy wasn't just a handsome stranger, they didn't know they were being used as bait. Chin-hae, I roared, sprinting into his war room. Your men, they're in Hawaii, they're using my friends to find. What, Maury leverage? He looked up from a map, his face unreadable. I didn't authorize that. If my men are there, they aren't mine anymore. Someone has flipped a faction of my guard. 24 hours later, I was back where it all began. The air in Honolulu was thick with moisture and the scent of hibiscus, but this time I wasn't a naive tourist. I wore a Glock 19 holstered at the small of my back and a headset connecting me to Chin-hae's tactical team. We find them, we get them out, and we burn the rest, I whispered into the mic. Stay in the car, Priscilla, Chin-hae's voice crackled in my ear. This is a tactical extraction. Like hell, I snapped, stepping out of the armored SUV. They're my best friends. They won't trust a man in a suit with a gun. They need to see me. I walked toward the pier, my heart racing. I saw them, Sonia's bright braids and Venus's tall, elegant frame. They were surrounded by 4 men in Hawaiian shirts that didn't hide the bulges of their weapons. Sonia, Venus, I shouted. They turned, their faces lighting up with relief before freezing in terror, as they saw the armed guards stepping out from behind me. Priscilla, what is going on? Venus screamed. The lead man holding them, a traitor from Chin-hae's own security detail, pulled Sonia in front of him, a knife to her throat. The Shadow King's woman, you've become quite the legend, Priscilla. Drop the gun or your friend bleeds out on the sand. Behind me the shadows seemed to lengthen. Chin-hae stepped forward, his presence so cold it felt like the temperature dropped 10 degrees. He didn't look at the traitor, he looked at me. Do it, Priscilla, he murmured. Show them why I chose you. I didn't drop the gun, I used the business analyst's brain. I calculated the wind, the distance, and the traitor's nervous twitch. I fired. The bullet caught the traitor in the shoulder, sending him spiraling into the water. In seconds, Chin-hae's loyalists swarmed the pier, securing my friends. The reunion was messy. Tears, screams, and the crushing weight of 1,000 lies. I had to tell them everything, or at least enough to keep them safe. We moved them to a secure villa, a satellite of Chin-hae's power. Later that night, the adrenaline finally crashed. I was shaking in the shower, the steam rising around my dark skin, trying to wash off the smell of salt and gunpowder. The curtain pulled back. Chin-hae stepped in, his eyes burning with a mixture of pride and terrifying lust. You took the shot, he whispered, his hands sliding over my hips, pulling my back against his chest. I had to save them, I gasped, turning in his arms. The heat of the water mingled with the fire between us. This was the 3rd time we had surrendered to this madness, but it felt different. It wasn't just obsession, it was a pact. As he pressed me against the tile, his touch was a vow of blood and bone. I wasn't just his captive or his analyst, I was his equal in the dark. The villa in Hawaii was a paradise, but to me it felt like a staging ground. Sonia and Venus were sequestered in the East Wing, guarded by men who looked like they belonged in an action movie. They were terrified, and rightfully so. I spent the morning explaining the unexplainable, how a birthday trip had spiraled into a life of international crime and high-stakes survival. You're the queen of a Mafia clan, Pris, Sonia whispered, clutching a glass of water. We thought you were just working for a high-end tech firm. I am the firm now, Sonia, I said, my voice cold and certain. I returned to my monitors. The Kim Syndicate was moving. I could see the digital footprints, large sums of money being moved to local Hawaiian contractors. Boat rentals. Heavy machinery and extra security. They weren't just coming for us, they were planning to level the villa. I looked at Evans, playing with a toy jet on the rug, and felt a cold, sharp clarity. No more hiding. They're coming tonight, I told Chin-hae as he entered the war room. He didn't look surprised, he looked ready. I've moved the perimeter back, we'll let them into the valley, then close the trap. No, I said, standing up. They have a mole inside your communications, that's how they knew where Sonia was. If you move the perimeter, they'll know it's a trap. We have to feed them what they want. I showed him the screen. I had created a ghost signal, a fake GPS coordinate that placed me and Evans at the old sugar mill 5 miles away. Chin-hae gripped the back of my chair, his knuckles white. It's too dangerous. If they realize the deception too early, they'll pivot here before my men can reset. Then you stay here and hold the fort, I said, meeting his dark eyes. I'll take a small team and lead them to the mill. I'm the one they want to use against you. I have to be the bait. The old sugar mill was a skeletal ruin of rusted iron and shadows. I sat in the center of the floor, the moonlight hitting my skin, while Evans was tucked safely in a reinforced bunker 3 levels below ground with 2 of Chin-hae's most trusted soldiers. The sound of helicopters cut through the night, then the roar of engines. The Kims didn't come for a chat, they came with fire. The first floor erupted in a hail of bullets. I dove behind a concrete pillar, my heart thundering. I wasn't an analyst anymore, I was a target. Now, I screamed into my comms. The darkness of the mill came alive. Chin-hae's snipers, hidden in the rusted rafters, opened fire. It was a symphony of chaos. I pulled my weapon, my hands steady. When a man in a black mask rounded the corner, I didn't hesitate. I fired. 1 shot. 2. I was protecting my son's future with every pull of the trigger. The leader of the Kim faction, a man named Dishim, emerged from the smoke. He held a detonator in his hand. Where is the boy, Priscilla? Tell me, or this whole mill becomes a tomb. He's somewhere you'll never reach, I spat, holding my ground. Before he could press the button, a shadow detached itself from the wall behind him. Chin-hae, he didn't use a gun. He used a blade, his movements a blur of lethal grace. He disarmed Dishim in a single motion, the detonator clattering to the floor. Chin-hae didn't kill him instantly. He kicked him to his knees and looked at me. He threatened our family, Priscilla. What is the analyst's conclusion? I looked at the man who had tried to take my son's life. I thought of the 4 years of fear and the life I had lost. The risk is too high to let him live, I said firmly. Chin-hae nodded, and the darkness claimed the rest. We returned to California a month later, but not to the suburbs. We moved into a sprawling estate that functioned as the new nerve center for the Beak clan. Sonia and Venus were given a consulting fee that would keep them wealthy for life, and a silent agreement to never speak of what they saw. Evans started a private school under a different name, guarded by a detail that looked like ordinary carpool dads. One evening, I stood on the balcony of our new home, looking out over the Pacific. Chin-hae stepped up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He pressed a kiss to the back of my neck, his hands lingering on my stomach. "You're quiet," he murmured. "I was just thinking about that night in Hawaii," I said, leaning back into him. "How I thought I was just a girl on a birthday trip." "You were never just a girl, Priscilla," he said, turning me around to face him. He slipped a diamond-encrusted band onto my finger, not just a ring, but a seal of the clan. "You were the missing piece of my empire, and now no one will ever take what is ours." Under the California stars, the Shadow King and his queen watched over their kingdom, bound by blood, obsession, and a love that was born in the dark and forged in fire.